Welcome to another episode of Artsy AF podcast. I'm your host, Andrew Norris. Thanks for being here. Big old shouts at the top of this one for our newest patron, Kathryn Williams. You can find her and her art at Ryn Vision, R-Y-N Vision on Instagram. There will be a link in the description here. Thank you, Kathryn. You officially put us over $100 a month, so I appreciate you. Next order of business is I got to shout out Andrew Sives. This dude just moved out to Colorado. He's been helping me with some content creation, some editing, and he's just an all-around great dude. I'm going to put his Instagram in the description. Check him out. Give him a big old shouts. DM him, say what's up. Connect. That's the guy. So appreciate you, Andrew. And this week's episode features Vladimir Kraynyk. Vladimir is an oil painter based out of Canada. And in this episode, he gives us his origin stories from making graffiti as a teenager in the Ukraine, and then moving to Canada, going to art school, learning oil painting. And then he talks about his process, which I find interesting. By the way, he's one of my favorite living painters right now. And he's going to have a show here in Denver at Ryan Joseph Gallery on July 17th. That's right. That'll be in about 10 days from whenever this podcast is released, I think. No, 12. But yeah, definitely go check it out. Stunning works. It's kind of like a blend of abstract but using like classical painting techniques. So the forms look really real, but you can't exactly put your finger on what they are. Very cool stuff. And yeah, we talk about a lot of things in this episode. Can't remember them all right now, so intros are intros, and let's just jump right into it. Here's Vladimir Kraynyk. Vladimir Kraynyk. Vladimir Kraynyk. Vladimir Kraynyk. Kraynyk. Hey, how's it going?
Hey, can you hear me?
Yeah. You hear me all right?
Oh, yeah, I'll put my headphones on.
Nice, thank you.
I think it will make it better sound.
Yeah, definitely. I was actually going to ask if you didn't have any. I was going to ask if you would.
Mm-hmm. Hi, how's it going?
Hi, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too.
Yeah, thanks for agreeing to do this. It's a great backdrop you have going on there. I'm going to go ahead and start recording.
It's a green screen.
Oh yeah.
Just kidding.
Yeah, I'm using just the built-in Zoom background or whatever. You can just put a picture up and it'll do that. But yeah, I'm going to go ahead and start recording video, if that's okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Alrighty. Well, heck yeah, Vladimir, thank you for coming on the podcast.
Hello. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So you've been working hard on this, like your first U.S. show coming up, right?
Yes, that's right. Really exciting.
Nice.
I have participated in group shows before in US once or twice, but this is my first solo show in US. That's right.
Nice. How many pieces are you going to have there?
Around 10. I still have 2 or 3 smaller pieces that are almost done, so I'm not quite sure if I will be able to get them done completely by the time of the shipping, which is next week. But around 10 pieces.
Nice, sweet. Well, yeah, I'm looking forward to
mostly.
Go ahead.
Mostly new pieces, but a few pieces from 2 or 3 years ago.
Okay, nice. Yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing them in person. I've been a fan of your work for a long time. And I definitely want to talk about, I guess since this is our first time meeting and your first time on the podcast, would you mind telling us kind of about how you got into making art as a kid and, whether or not you were like a weird kid or anything like that?
I definitely can say that I was a weird kid, but I was not a particularly artsy kid. And my family is not artistic really in any way. And how I first got acquainted with art was through graffiti, spray painting.
Nice.
And I lived in Ukraine at the time, went to high school in Ukraine. And my friends got into graffiti through the hip hop culture that was coming in through MTV and this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And they got some graffiti magazines and they saw it there and they decided to copy it. And during class, we were copying these graffitis, like just mimicking it from some magazine. We didn't know what it says. We didn't know what it is. There was no internet yet or anything. I was 13, I believe. It was 2003.
Okay.
And and like first my friends started doing it, and I had no previous experience with art whatsoever. No art class at school, nothing. I didn't know how to draw. Like it was not my thing. I was a little bit into music already. I did. I was playing synthesizer. I went to music school for that, and
Nice.
I think that also influenced my art taste later as well. But anyway, didn't know anything about art. I started going with my friends, seeing how they do this graffiti stuff, and because they had this like cool, like mysterious status about them, I was like, I want to do this too. So, but like I tried. I was really, really bad for a few months, but then I got really upset about that, and I went to visit my grandma in Siberia, and I took a bunch of these magazines with me, and I was like fanatically copying the graffiti in those magazines for a few weeks and gradually started to get better. And eventually after 1 year, I became like the main person in my class doing that. And then like the main person in my neighborhood doing that. Then like the main person in my town doing that. And I got so much into graffiti and like all those classmates like quit long ago, but I kept doing it. And I got like into like big graffiti scene and like started painting walls and trains and going all over the country and like other countries. And yeah, that's how it all started.
Nice.
So yeah, and but around age 18, my family moved to Canada, and my dad got a job here. We moved to Canada, and then naturally I continued doing it here. And met through internet already. Internet culture was developing, and through internet, some graffiti forums. I met some guys from locally here and started doing it with them. And for a few years, it was very intense. It was very, very intense, especially 2010. Then the question arose of me going to university, and I just knew graffiti stuff. I didn't know anything else about anything else. I didn't know anything about any kind of fine art history, like anything, like literally nothing.
Right.
But my parents were like, you have to go to university. And I'm like, well, I don't know anything. Oh, by the way, not just art. I didn't know anything about anything. I just was doing graffiti fanatically my whole teenage years.
Yeah.
So the closest to that was a fine art degree. And I went into that, like completely not knowing what I'm getting into.
Yeah. Well, that's cool. So you didn't even like use oil paint or any other medium besides spray paint until you were in college or in university?
Pretty much. And the first time I used oil paint when I was 20.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
Dang. You've
20 or 21. Yeah, around that time.
Yeah, I can definitely see the graffiti influence in your work. It has very like, it almost, sometimes it looks like it's like, it might be like hinting at letters or words or something, but it's also got this fabric-y kind of like liquid metallic feel to it. I wanted to ask you about your work. What's your process like with it? Because it seems like you're kind of just improvising as you go along just based off the finished product. That's what it looks like you might be doing to me. But are you planning it out at all when you make these paintings?
Well, to go back to your earlier observation, yes. From graffiti years, I think that the main thing that kind of transferred over into my art phase was the appeal of three-dimensionality, the three-dimensional forms, and what kind of effect they have. What kind of effect they have. Purely like it was aesthetic intuition. Basically, it was just the effect on the viewer that those forms had. I transplanted them into the abstract, purely abstract realm. But everything else, like the letters aspect and the conceptual aspect of graffiti, I have left behind. Yeah, and to your question about the process, it is definitely planned. It is definitely planned. It is definitely planned ahead of time. I form like general sort of idea, what's called gestalt in psychology also.
Sure.
And then work from general to more specific, but it first starts with some kind of general idea, like what kind of effect I want to have, and like I think about what kind of effect this image overall has on me. So I want to achieve the same kind of effect on the viewer. So this overall effect, it has to be preserved, and then I go into the details and add or subtract only in accordance with this goal of having that effect. So first, I started by doing it purely from my graffiti skills, and like just transfer them to oil paint. And oil paint allows much more possibilities and like flexibility and infinitely broader variety of effects and details and scope of what you can do. But first, I did it purely spontaneously from my head, so to speak. I did some sketches, etc. But later, I saw that you could achieve much more realistic and efficient effects by using 3D modeling software.
Oh, nice.
And I started using that as my template, purely as a model, as a creation of initial model, and it is very useful for achieving realistic light and color and planning out, and it eliminates a lot of the process that you would have to go through if you were just to paint right away. And the oil paint is not it's super forgiving if you just start to kind of mismatch it and like go over it here and there. You kind of have to know what you're doing and where you're gonna put what.
Right.
So before we even come to the oil painting, you have to already have some kind of template or like some precise idea, more or less precise idea of what you're gonna do. Otherwise, I don't think it's gonna work out as effectively, at least for my goals.
Yeah, for sure. What kind of software are you using, or what's it called?
It's called Cinema 4D.
Oh, okay, nice. Yeah,
Cinema 4D. Are you familiar?
I'm familiar with it. I haven't really used it at all myself, but I know several people who just love it. You know. There's apparently a lot you can do with it.
Yeah, it's pretty good. It's good for animation. It's good for color and modeling and this kind of stuff. Apparently, it's not as good for architecture and doing some precise modeling and for more utilitarian purposes. But for art purposes, I heard it's one of the better ones. Nice. And but I just want to make it clear. I don't just copy the image that I get from that. I take it as a template, and then I use all sorts of other painting techniques and spontaneous different things that I add here and there as I go in the process, because I don't really see the point in just copying what computer generated for you.
Sure.
Although, that could be an artwork in its own right, and we can talk about that. But it's the physicality of the painting and the spontaneous of the movement and the energy that you put into it, and the individual mark is extremely important. So this is just a template.
Absolutely.
And and then first 2 years and 3 years, I didn't use it. I was doing it completely out of my own head. It's just later I realized how much possibilities it can offer as well.
Yeah. So you went to school for art. What did you have any mentors while you were there? Other than just like a normal professor, did anyone kind of was anyone there to guide you in a special way at all?
I can't say that. No.
Really.
Some professors were better than others, and kind of right away I was interested in more, in simple terms, like aesthetic aspect of art had primacy for me.
Sure.
It's not like I completely wanted to ignore the conceptual aspect, but the aesthetic aspect had primacy for me. And as a result of that, I was interested in technicalities of things and how to use this paint or that paint and then these kind of brushes, what is better, like, and et cetera, all these mediums and oil paint can get confusing. There's a lot of different aspects to it, and a lot of different configurations in which you can combine these materials. But most of the professors in art school were not able to give me that kind of information.
Really?
Because, yes, because they are focused on, they're focused on more, let's say, conceptual aspects of art. In a certain vein, and also not just conceptual aspects of art, but in a certain vein of thought, and let's put it this way, and a certain kind of certain kind of discourses. And even though in the beginning I was more open to it, I gradually realized that I'm going to have to carve out my own way, because a lot of stuff that they were discussing there didn't interest me as much, to be honest.
Yeah.
But I was lucky enough. Well, I was lucky enough to have some independent and even within the university interest in my art already. Even like outside of the art faculty, I got commissioned by the university to paint murals inside the university.
Right.
They bought like the university itself bought the paintings from me, and so I kind of branched out right away and went onto my own path that just didn't conform exactly to the trend that was going on purely just in the bubble of art school.
Yeah. I've never been, never went to art school or anything, but a lot of times I hear kind of similar stories where they're not really teaching like techniques or basic things like value, tone, and all that kind of thing. But they go so far into like the conceptual thing or the like socio-political thing of art,
Yep.
Do you think that art should play some kind of like socio-political role in society, or do you think it does?
It definitely can.
Sure.
But in the way that it's been presented in the last 50, 60, 70 or so years,
mm-hmm.
I feel like it's been really narrowed down and appropriated by, I'm talking about the Western world, like Western Europe and North America.
Sure.
It's been appropriated by a certain kind of, how to put it, liberal discourse, and with the exclusion of a lot of other aspects of art,
mm-hmm.
and often exclusion of even purely aesthetic art for the art's sake, and exclusion of just disinterested inquiry and exploration. Meaning it was forced to have some kind of agenda,
right,
and promoted in that way. And I view it as a negative development because I find that it fundamentally constrains the freedom of what we should be doing in art.
Nice.
Having said that, I do believe that it can have a social function in a way that it can open up people to kind of non-mundane, non-linear, non-everydayness. It can bring them out of this everydayness and give them new ideas and like provoke certain new discourses. And in a way, in the development of media in the late 20th century, that has been taken up by films more and more visual, screen-based media.
Yeah.
And like traditional mediums like painting and sculpture, they kind of took. They went into like elitist kind of smaller niche
mm-hmm.
of the spectrum, and but it applies to all these. It applies to all these arts.
Yeah.
What I'm saying, and because there is ideology and certain kind of agenda pushed in the movies just as much as was in the contemporary art sphere.
Sure.
So,
I feel like that, like art that has like a super political agenda doesn't have very much of a shelf life, if you know what I mean. Like a century or two from now, like I feel like the stuff that you're making can be appreciated by anyone from any time. Do you know what I mean? Whereas like,
no, I hope so.
Yeah. Whereas like, so because it's just you're just making something beautiful and just really well put together compositionally, and you don't have to have been alive in 2021 to know what's going on in this painting, if you could ever even know what's going on in a painting like that, right? And that's kind of the beauty of it, is you that's what sparks the discussion, like what is this, do you think about that in your work, like what
Absolutely.
it is, what you're trying to say, or if you're trying to say anything at all? Or
Absolutely, I do think about that, and it's actually often becomes a problem of self-struggle, because if you start rationalizing it too much, you start questioning what it is you're doing, and to the detriment of the action itself.
Sure.
So sometimes I'm not painting basically for a while because I just don't know what the hell am I even doing, like how to conceptualize and how to put it, and like do I need to somehow like synchronize it with what's going on right now in the art sphere and in the world in general, or am I completely detached from it and I can just work for the future, so to say, that someone in 200 years from now looks at it,
sure.
And there are all these questions that we ask all the time. Fundamentally, I think at the bottom of it, I think we are completely free, and I think the freedom is the essence of human being, and like real freedom of completely not being conditioned by the time you live in, and by the material constraints, and by all trends and political agendas, for sure. And I think art is the great vehicle to express that freedom, and we can choose to live in our own, like a medieval time in our head if you want to. We can choose to be we can choose to be in some other paradigm. We can choose any paradigm of thought and like system of coordinates we want ultimately. And when someone tells you no, that you're supposed to believe that only like this and this, and it's like 2021 and you're supposed to believe what science says now, etc., etc. No, I disagree with that. We can take philosophies of ancient Greece and appropriate them. We can and like live in and appropriate this cosmology. We can choose any time to live in basically that we want. And crazy as it may sound to some,
no,
but
cool.
In my art, I wanted to be specific enough to preserve that aesthetic appeal and that effect that the three-dimensionality and like can have, but at the same time be general enough to be able to spark the process of imagination in someone, for them to be able to access that imaginal realm.
Yeah.
So abstraction, I think, is really good for that, but not every kind of abstraction. I kind of reject complete chaos, and I reject primitivism, and I reject, just plain, simple, kind of facile, kind of ugly forms of abstraction, because I don't think they engage that visual, because I don't think they have that visual appeal to be able to engage the person like something more sophisticated can, and something that has more layers of complexity.
Right.
And oftentimes like people who don't know anything about art or just kind of don't know about abstraction, they see my paintings and some elements to them are realistic enough that they almost want to see some kind of thing in it, some figurative thing. They want to read it figuratively.
Totally.
And it's kind of humorous to me, because when someone comes up and says that they see a butterfly in your abstract piece, it can be funny, but that's totally okay, because it activated their imagination.
Yeah.
It broke them out. It broke them out from this mechanistic kind of, oh, this is a cup, this is a book, this is a table. It like breaks them out of that and makes them reflect theoretically about what they're seeing, and like makes them work to see what they're seeing, and then engages them, and then that conversation can lead in any kind of path. And so again, I do kind of two contradictory things here. Like I wanted to be specific enough to be able to do that, but it still has to be general enough to be able to be taken into like an infinite number of these narratives.
Yeah, your work has like it's very abstract, like you were saying, for sure, but it also has this kind of like classical feel to it. Like you can, I don't even, sometimes like words fail, right, with paintings, but you can tell that although it's abstract, that you're trying to make it very real at the same time. Like again, you're talking about the three-dimensionality.
Yeah, it's that aesthetic intuition I'm talking about. Is that what you just said, you can't express with text or words. It's the aesthetic intuition, and it's fundamentally energetic. It has an energetic effect on the psyche.
Yeah,
that's what I'm trying to get. And I find that these effects of three-dimensionality and the dynamism and the energy and all these things together kind of combined, they can create that sort of effect. But about the classical reference that you said, yeah, for sure, I'm drawn to that, because as I started doing art, I started to think about like what is the kind of world we're living, what is the philosophical underpinnings. Like I can just unreflectively do it and just do it because it looks cool. Mm-hmm. Yes, it does look cool. It's like, and that's super important. It looks cool.
Yeah.
In simple terms, but I can't just do it in a vacuum. I want to look at the art of the past, like where we came from, what's going on, why did these people do it this way, why did this people value it that way, what happened in 20th century, why the hell did it all kind of break down into pieces? And as I started doing art more and more, I started asking these questions and started looking into philosophy and started studying more philosophy and history and these kind of subjects, because I think fundamentally without having a worldview,
yeah,
you're not going to be able to really answer what is it that you're doing.
Right.
You're just going to be in a vacuum, and you're also going to be susceptible to propaganda and like the trends and kind of like the fleeting sort of movements and the kind of superficialities of the moment you're in.
Sure.
And you're not going to be able to position yourself in a kind of meta level that gives you freedom, like what I was talking about before.
Yes.
So you need to have that freedom. You have to know what happened before and why are we here now, and et cetera, et cetera. And started studying because I grew up in European culture context, and I started looking to where it came from, and started looking to Renaissance. And Renaissance is really big for me in terms of the painting and even technical influence and like the worldview that they had of the human being. And the Renaissance, of course, is the revival of antiquity. And what's antiquity? It's ancient Greece and Rome. So I went back to that because most of the concepts that we live around now, not just in art, but in politics and science and everything, they came from ancient Greece and Rome.
Yeah.
And they're all based on Greek and Latin. And I thought that without knowing these roots or just at least being familiar with them, it's impossible to know what you're doing right now.
Yeah.
And so I went back to that and started studying philosophers like Plato, Aristotle, and the things like that. And sometimes I really felt the urge to somehow incorporate figures of an ancient art and sculpture into my art as well.
Nice.
And as a kind of archetypes that come together. Yeah. It's mostly I want to keep it general enough, like I said before, but sometimes I just can't help but it's calling you, that image. It's calling you, and you want to put it there.
Yeah, sure.
Somehow you want to incorporate it there somehow. But it's like really subtle thing. It's like it really has to be organic. Mm-hmm. It really has to be organic and still general enough as an archetype to be able to have that effect.
I actually have. I'm gonna screen share here real quick because I have one of those paintings that you were just talking about pulled up, or I downloaded it for this episode. So let's see. Share screen, and I think it's this one. And are you seeing that painting there? Cool.
Yeah,
that's good. Yeah. So this is kind of like what you're talking about, like throwing in an old archetype, like it looks like a Greek sculpture or maybe a Renaissance sculpture.
No, this is actually ancient. This is ancient Roman sculpture.
Oh, okay.
It's taken from equestrian bronze portrait of Emperor Marcus Aurelius.
Oh, nice.
Who's considered kind of like the chief philosopher also of a school called Stoicism.
Yeah.
And I was reading his book Meditations, and I was also in Rome at the time, and I just really felt the urge to incorporate it somehow into my art. As you can see here, there's this chaotic swirl, like really energetic, sort of chaotic energy, but then it ranges itself into this orderly head bust. And this is in itself a metaphor for kind of gathering all the elements into some kind of order, which is what he talks about in his philosophy.
Yeah.
And Stoicism is very it's a hierarchical philosophy about like having a solid grounding, having a purpose, having kind of like subjugating the chaos.
Yeah.
Stoicism teaches that. That's kind of what I was trying to express.
Yeah. So do you feel like Stoicism is one of your, like, I guess, an influence that you've pulled from a different sort of medium outside of painting? Do you have any other influences also?
Philosophically wise, Stoicism is more of a side note. I was interested in it. Mm-hmm. I was reading that particular book and that particular author at the time. But Stoicism is kind of a simplified version of Platonism, you can say, and it's more applied to everyday life. Overall, I was more interested in Plato himself. Mm-hmm. Plato is one of the main ancient Greek philosophers. And as far as influence on my art, definitely. Philosophy from ancient to modern and to even some 20th century people like Martin Heidegger and Friedrich Nietzsche, they definitely influenced my art. Yeah, it's mostly European continental tradition of philosophy, as opposed to Anglo-analytical tradition.
Nice.
More continental, more mystical.
Yeah, for sure. Do you and if we need to, we can edit this out if you don't feel comfortable answering this. But when you start talking about Greece, it reminded me of the mystery school. God, I can't think of it. Elysium. Do you know about that?
Yeah.
Do you participate in that sacrament at all?
No, no. I personally do not participate in any mystery schools, and I'm sure even if I would be prohibited of telling you about it.
Yeah, sure. I just, I live in Colorado, which is kind of like a little bubble of like, yeah, we can talk about this, I think, but
we can definitely talk about this, and we should talk about this. The ancient mystery schools were extremely important on development of Greek thought and philosophy, and even though they were kind of esoteric, but on the exoteric outer level, they influenced all these main people. And the idea of art as initiation, the idea of art is opening this imaginal inner dimension of raising consciousness. Definitely. I absolutely believe in that power of art. I think it can do that. Not all art, not at all times, not with all people.
Yeah.
Although hopefully, but it can. I believe in the transformative power of it.
Nice.
For sure. It's a mystery of transforming yourself, like alchemically, while you're doing it.
Yeah.
But if you can imprint that energy of transformation into the piece, it might, hopefully, want to believe so, it might have that transformative potentiality, capability onto the other people.
Right.
So
yeah, or
in that sense, it can be esoteric. So nothing esoteric can be truly revealed. Like, you can talk about these mysteries the whole time, but it's a psychological experience of transformation. You can know like every single ritual, all these mystery participants are doing, but if you're not engaged in it in that way, it's not going to do anything to you.
Right. It's kind of like how you can tell someone about how you've changed internally, but until they go through something similar, it's kind of like a weird disconnect between the words and the experience, right?
Correct. Yes, it's fundamentally experiential.
A question that just popped up for me, just because I think I'm just interested in it as another artist. What kind of medium are you using with your oil paint there?
I use something called solvent-free fluid. It's produced by a company called Gamblin. I'm sure most artists know.
Yeah.
And it's good because it doesn't smell as bad. And it's also good because it has the optimal consistency for me personally. And it's not too thin and it's not too thick, because they have also this other product called Galkid. It dries too fast for me.
Yeah.
And I use it sometimes for some stuff where some fast, touch-ups and glazes and this kind of things. But most of the bulk of the painting I do with a medium called solvent-free fluid. But I often don't have it too. I run out of it and I use just regular linseed oil with odorless mineral spirits, and then mix them together like the standard, like old school way. And it also works, but it makes it dry longer. And sometimes it's okay, sometimes not. Depends on your situation and the style you work in. But nice. I use this solvent-free fluid.
Oh, cool. Nice. Also, I wanted to ask you about while you're painting, do you I feel like artists kind of have to have this this duality in terms of like their confidence in their own work, where on one hand, you have to be, again, confident about what you're making, like that you think it's good enough that it should be made. But then on the other hand, in this weird paradoxical way, the work can never really be good enough. You've never really like arrived at the peak. Do you doubt yourself at all when you're painting, or do you get frustrated, and how do you deal with that?
Yes and no. Yes and no. There are so many variables here. So
Right.
Sometimes you do. It depends from painting to painting and from situation to situation. It varies. And mostly 95% of the time, I'm not satisfied with it.
Yeah.
But it's even more frustrating because you can't really do anything about it anymore in one particular painting.
Right.
So you're going to have to move on and to start the other painting. But you may also not be satisfied with that painting too. So it basically never ends.
Yeah.
I think I can tell which ones of my paintings are better than the others.
Sure.
And why. But every next time it's a blank slate and you don't really know what's going to come and how satisfied you're going to be with it, or how satisfied you're going to be 5 years. It's fundamentally 5 years from now. And I've had both. I've had situations where I didn't like the work right away and liked it later. And I've had situations where I liked the work, but 2 years after that, I didn't like the work. So there are so many variables. There are so many variables here that it's impossible to give one answer to it.
Yeah.
But yes, usually like a default mode of my attitude to it is not satisfied.
Yeah. I think that's kind of what an artist is, right? It's like you keep on becoming. You never really like, and maybe that's just like what being a human being is that you're constantly like changing and evolving and learning new things, so that the next time whatever it is that you do, whether you're just speaking to someone or you're making a painting, if you're cognizant of it, you can kind of upgrade yourself and your work as you go along.
Mm-hmm. That's right. It's really non-linear. It's not some one progression line. It's a kind of four-dimensional chart where it goes back and forth and up and down, and you don't really know. And like your perception, your grid of interpretation of it changes, and the work itself changes according to that interpretation. And it's kind of that feedback loop. And you don't really know. I don't really know what's going to come.
So do you ever paint over stuff? Do you ever like start something and you're like, I don't like this, I'm going to paint over it?
Rarely.
Or do you just plow through?
And even if I do, it usually doesn't work out as well. So I try to avoid that because I'm not talking some super small details here and there. That happens almost all the time. I'm talking some. If you're talking about some big, that's huge, essential, like crucial elements of the painting, then usually no. Usually I have it planned out more or less before, and it more or less usually works out. But for instance, last year I did a painting that I was kind of working for a month on it, and it kept not working out, and I kept reworking it, and it ended up being like total garbage, and I just get rid of it. Because usually if it doesn't work right away, it's probably not going to work for me.
Yeah. I wanted to circle back on something. You were talking about how some people see, that they want to pull out forms in your work, and they'll tell you whenever they see a butterfly or whatever, or water. What's your... This is kind of related. But what's your overall take on consciousness and what it is? Do you fall more on the like, it's a field that we're tapping into, or do you fall more on the side of like it's a material like phenomenon that comes from the human brain, that comes from the physical brain?
Definitely not the second one.
Yeah.
I believe in the primacy of mind over the material.
Mm-hmm.
How exactly do they interact together? I honestly cannot answer that, because we clearly know that mind to a huge extent depends on the physical structures in the brain and the abilities, etc., etc.
Mm-hmm.
But I believe, as human beings evolved and separated themselves from purely nature, unconscious nature as force, and started to create their own realm of culture, and then technology, I believe they acquired this ability to connect to what ancient Greeks called logos, as this access of narrative or meaning or however you want to call it, some kind of narrative structure of the cosmos, and to create that meaning and to connect and to align themselves and the world according to that axis of meaning. And this is crucial to human consciousness. And how exactly it happens, I will not claim.
Right.
But I do think I do believe in the primacy of non-material over the material.
Sure.
Definitely. And we know now that all matter is fundamentally historical, that there used to be nothing. Even official science acknowledges the Big Bang theory and all these things, that the universe started at some point, and it started from basically nothingness or some kind of static noise.
Yeah.
Of just like field of intensivity out of which some kind of form started to be born and infinitely started to grow in complexity. And what is that force that makes it grow in complexity? Is this developmental force, developmental power. We don't know, regardless of how we want to call it, God, or just the energy of development, or whatever name you want to put it. I believe that exists.
Yeah.
And our life is to serve it somehow, to serve the goal of infinite creativity and growth and ascendance of forms and movement towards infinite complexity.
Yeah.
More and more complexity. That's the best as I can put it.
Nice. Do you feel like?
And by the way, my art itself, I want to illustrate almost that concept of kind of forms being born out of static noise and growing into some kind of signal and like more and more definition, and that process of morphogenesis, of genesis of forms. I want to capture that at some point of just enough specificity to be able to have that suggestion of forms of what we were talking about earlier.
Yeah.
And not too early when it's complete chaos, like some Jackson Pollock painting or something.
Sure.
So it's like my art can be seen as like zoomed in Jackson Pollock at a later stage, at a later stage of growth. Of that chaos
as the forms are like developing out of the splatter.
That's right.
That's a cool way to put it. I like that. So as we're talking about this kind of infinite, like reaching infinite complexity, where do you see the future of the art world going? Do you think there'll be like a push into more like digital or virtual reality spaces?
There may be a push in digital and reality spaces. I think it's almost guaranteed to be. But again, that itself is the platform. That is the medium. What kind of my question is what kind of discourses are going to predominate there? Who's going to control it? And what kind of space of curation is going to be there? What kind of process of curation is going to be happening there?
Yeah.
I personally would not like it to be the same people who kind of dominate the official art market as we know it now, to supplant themselves into this new digital realm and control the discourse.
Yeah.
Because technology can give us infinite possibilities, but it can also stifle us, and it can also, if it's centralized in some one, or several monopolistic entities that have control over like who gets what and basically gatekeep and the kind of arrange the rules of the game into their advantage, as I think it's now in the art world, then it would not be as good. But I think with the development of the centralized technologies like blockchain and the crypto and all these things, I think we have a chance in getting a more human empowering spaces.
Yeah.
And even this show that I'm gonna have, what we're talking now, with Ryan's gallery.
Yes.
And Ryan, to whom I'm really thankful for giving me this opportunity to exhibit in US.
Yeah.
I think it's kind of his gallery is a unit in an emerging kind of alternative space of exhibiting art.
Yeah.
As a kind of counter to the official, super regulated, old school now kind of art market.
Yeah.
That is not only controlled by monetarily, like through like established financial means, but through kind of most important is through kind of ideology that I referred to earlier.
Yeah.
And
I wanted to ask you about that. Why do you think How do you think this kind of, I don't know what I would call it, but it seems like in the 19th, early 20th century, there was kind of more of a focus on like aesthetic and beauty and things like that. And so, what do you think it took a turn into more just conceptual, one stripe on a canvas or splatters on a canvas kind of thing?
I think it is definitely a reflection of general what is called the decline of the Western metaphysics, and because in 19th century with the rise of science and technology, the West became more and more secular and renounced kind of the transcendental realm, what was mostly dominated by Christianity in the West, and more as that more and more started to disappear. The traditional ideas, ancient ideas of beauty, truth, and goodness, they kind of got detached and like spread into different directions. And later in 20th century, that developed more and more. And fundamentally, after World War II, we have the start of postmodern philosophy, which relativized everything and basically, in a kind of nihilistic, in a completely nihilistic sense, undermined the assumptions that were dominant in European culture for centuries about beauty, about order, about hierarchy, about all these things. And it's not like they didn't have a point. Like they made some they made some super important discoveries about the nature of art and the nature of our perception and the nature of text and our relationship with the medium and like the nature, the language of the medium itself and all these things. And like how, for instance, like the Marcel Duchamp kind of ready-mades and the urinal and like the contextualization of kind of useful tools, objects, and to bring them into museum space and how they transform based on where they are, and the ability to show, basically to uncover the inner mechanism of the creation of the works of art, and to kind of dismantle all our assumptions of what was before that. Yes, I get it. Great, you guys did it. That's awesome. But I think that past that nihilistic movement started going further and further, and we got into complete dissipation of all objectivity and of all objects and of everything and of the hierarchy. And that I think is fundamentally not good. And I think we need to return to some kind of more creation of new access and the new forms of building and the new forms of I can't put it any other way other than hierarchy. We need some kind of new way. We need order. We need some kind of new order of a series of orders, or something that is going to fill that void. Otherwise, we're going to be forever stuck in this sort of destructive spirit of nihilism, trying to undermine and question everything and to relativize everything. And that is fundamentally, it has no end. It's infinitely going to divide. The destructive spirit has no end. I think it's going to infinitely go and go, and it's going to get into this infinite regression. Yeah. And on the kind of on the purely utilitarian level of art business and the art market and things like that, it turns into a kind of power game of who can promote war and who can promote more and who can put who where, and like in a system of this. They were trying to basically destroy hierarchy, but they still left a hierarchy for themselves in terms of who they put how, and they control and manipulate the market and culture. And I think we need to. And I think we need to break from that and create our own other alternative spaces where we're going to have other narratives started, because if we're not going to have any narrative at all, it's going to be destruction forever.
That made me think of like reductionist materialism, right? Where like if you take a thing and you just keep chopping at it, like eventually you're not going to have anything. And if you're chopping at the ground you stand on, which, whatever, if it's the art world, like you have to have, I think most people appreciate beauty. You're talking about the true, the good, the beautiful.
Yeah.
Like truth is kind of hard sometimes to figure out. Good
Yeah.
it can be pretty relative depending on who's perceiving or making that call. But beauty is pretty easy. That's an easy one for us to
It's
perceive.
easier. I think it's easier. Yes.
And
of course, they say like they make the most incredible nonsense ever, and then they say the beauty is in the eye of the beholder. And to a certain extent that's true, but not to an infinite relativistic extent.
Yeah, not to an absolute extent.
Yeah, no, not to an absolute relativistic extent where it's there's infinite, no limit to that. And in terms of truth, in terms of scientific truth as a accurate representation of objective reality, art is basically no good for that.
Right. Sure.
But in this other sense of truth that we tend to overlook as a revelation of something non-quantifiable about the world, but qualitative experience, like ancient Greeks called the name for truth was the word for truth was aletheia, and it meant uncovering, unveiling, kind of de-occultation. And in that sense, art can encapsulate and show something about the world and your experience to it that regular scientific 2 + 2 = 4 truth cannot.
Yeah.
So that's why art is extremely important.
Something I just thought of, and I want to hear what you think about this, is that as mediums have grown and multiplied throughout the 20th century, by the time we got to radio and television, like propaganda and mass deception was easier than ever. Do you think that art might just be a reflection of giant states lying to everyone all the time?
Again, it is definitely a huge part of it, as we talked before. Like I said, this infinite postmodern relativistic dissipation of art into ever more increasing regression.
Yeah.
It is very easy for them to weaponize it as a vehicle for propaganda, and I think that's what happened to a huge extent. And if you look at the how it's presented and what kind of content is being presented in a lot of contemporary art, not all, I'm not saying all, there is some exceptions. There are some exceptions, but official sphere of contemporary art, I definitely think it has been for a while a vehicle of propaganda for basically the state and these global institutions that are adjacent to the state. But again, it is great that we can still we can, for now, before we are totally completely subjugated to some AI force, which is a big danger, by the way. We still can create our alternative spaces where we can create other narratives, and basically they can't do anything about it.
Yeah.
So we should do that.
Yeah, and that is what is exciting about blockchain and DAOs and just all the digital, the rising of the digital crypto free space. That's exciting. I hope it doesn't get reconquested, I guess.
I think it's, realistically speaking, it probably will to some extent get reconquested by these forces because they have a disproportionate amount of resources and market. Like in the beginning when Facebook was starting, everyone was like, yeah, this is the biggest revolution ever. Now everyone's going to have a voice, and look where it's got 10 years from now. It's like the censorship and centralization and the control and like fact checkers and all this stuff is so crazy that it's anything but expression of free speech. And I think this is because of its decentralized nature, the blockchain new space. I think it can avoid some of these issues. And even if some big platforms in there are going to get reconquested by these same powers, there's going to be at least the possibility of more creating the other ones. And people who are already in it and people who have been in crypto since the beginning, they were very conscious of this. And that's how crypto started, right?
Exactly.
Like it was mainly started in the libertarian kind of circles. And the people who understood that the financial system and the the infrastructure of speech and media systems are fundamentally corrupt and centralized and at the whim of some political agenda.
Yeah.
So I'm definitely optimistic. I'm bullish. I'm bullish in crypto.
Yeah, same. Sweet. What? So I'll just
not to mention that this is the best investment opportunity in probably thousands of years.
Oh yeah.
Like Bitcoin went up from $1 to 60 grand in 10 years. I mean, there's nothing else that did that.
Yeah. I wish I would have bought in super early. When did you buy in, if you don't mind me asking?
I started getting into it in 2018.
Nice.
So I was late. I was late to like the first major bull run.
Yeah.
But I started looking into it more and figured there's going to be probably more. And guess what? It did.
Yeah.
So I started getting into 2018 and more in 2019 and even more in 2020 after the March COVID crash.
Yeah.
That's when I started studying it really heavily and got more into it for sure.
Nice. Have you? I haven't talked about this in a while on the show, but have you considered making an NFT out of any of your work?
Yeah, I'm considering that. I haven't made it yet.
Yeah.
But I would consider that. I'm absolutely of the opinion of that physical paintings have the primacy and they are the real work of art. And NFT is kind of a derivative of that. And skeptical as I am about it, I think it's kind of inevitable that this is going to be another sort of sub art market. And I can't say that I will not participate in it, but I definitely believe in the primacy of the physical paintings because they carry that tradition and that energy and that individual mark only they can have that effect that often the mark of authenticity that is made by the human in our age of increasing machination and of mechanization of everything. I think physical paintings is gonna have staying power because of that, individual kind of creative imprint that they have.
Yeah. Well,
they're not going away. They're not going to go away.
Yeah, I kind of draw like an analogy from the music scene, right? It went heavily electronic the last 20, 30 years, I guess. And but there's still plenty of room for more traditional I guess all music is electronic now, more or less. Even if you're just making a recording, you have to use electronic devices to help you with that. But
except for maybe live concerts of classical music, I guess they are exempt from being electronic.
Yeah. But if you're recording it, you still have to use that. Anyway, but live concerts. Yes. Yeah. My point is that like there's still room for classical music. There's still room for other genres besides electronic music, which I happen to love. Kind of everything. I'm that guy, right? Like I like classical music. I like rap and electronic and rock and blue. Anyway, my point is that the analogy between like digital works, like NFTs and things like this, is that yes, that will take off, but I think that there will definitely be space for physical paintings, and until like the VR and the technology catches up to making you actually feel like you're standing next to a painting, then I think there's something to be said for like in-person physical paintings. Like being around like works of art like that, where that yes, right now, it trumps being, even in like the most advanced VR space, standing next to art or viewing art.
Yeah, no, I think that should be preserved, and I think VR, no matter how good it's gonna get, I fundamentally do not believe it's ever gonna replace that effect that being near authentic handmade painting is, because of that. Individual touch and the energy, the energy that you put in it, and if you're perceptive enough as a viewer, you should be able to feel it if the painting is good enough. And I think it should. I think VR yes, it's gonna definitely create some alternative forms of art, and it's gonna like make these like sub-worlds and worlds within worlds. And yet I think there is a danger in pursuing that kind of complete escapism.
Sure.
And we still have to be grounded in reality, because if you do completely pursue that artificial world, again, you might be subjugated by some powers and the media and the controllers of the infrastructure.
Yeah.
That are gonna be staying in the real world and controlling also the digital realm. So we have to be careful with that.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you feel like humans are threatened at all, or artists, I guess, painters are threatened at all by artificial intelligence in terms of replacing them anytime soon?
No, I don't.
Nice. Yeah, same here.
But no, because art is the ultimate expression of the creative spirit of the humans,
right,
and it's ultimately expression of the free will, which I believe we have. Because if we don't have free will, then everything is absurd. Everything is reduced to absurdity, and there's no creativity if we don't have free will. Which is why I'm skeptical of the like radically reductive, mechanistic, behaviorist, biological, reductionistic approach to the human being. Not skeptical of science as method, but I'm skeptical of scientism as an ideology.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, and I do think we have free will, and everything arises out of that, and art is fundamental expression of that. And the future is non-determined, and even God cannot know what is going to happen. And yes, and art is expression of that. And I don't think even the most sophisticated AI I feel like it's still going to be limited by the amount of possibilities and algorithms that it's going to be able to enact. And I think when humans are reduced to a formula, they cease being humans after that point. And Dostoevsky already made that observation in the 19th century about how when everything is going to be figured out about the human, like how the all formula about how to be happy, about how to achieve maximum efficiency, the real humans are still going to rebel even against that, just for the sake of rebellion. Sure. Because human nature is ultimate freedom, and it's not, and happiness is not cannot be calculated or quantified in some kind of AI. So yes, AI presents great danger in terms of reducing our human capabilities, but it can also empower us in a way that it depends who's going to be controlling it, how it's going to be reenacted, and a lot of disturbing thoughts here. I don't want to go into that. I don't want to go into that much, but the military control, surveillance implications of that kind of technology are extremely disturbing.
Yeah,
and we should really, and again, this is gonna segue into politics right away. So I don't want to get too much. I don't want to turn it into like a big politics discussion. but people should really get educated about what kind of negative possibilities that can arise out of that, because the gap between those who, if it plays out in a negative way for us, the gap between those who are going to be able to have those capabilities of AI and calculate and control everything at the same time and like have this kind of centralized control of it, and the gap between everyone else would be so enormous that it threatens our freedom fundamentally.
Yeah. And I mean, the gap continues to widen, especially like in the last year or two. So yeah, I think it's definitely a good thing to be on the lookout for, at the very, very least, right?
At least we should be able to be talking about it and not being censored. And,
right. Yeah, sure. So what are your thoughts on the CIA? No, I'm just kidding.
Nice one.
So yeah, let's wrap it up here. I'll ask you a couple more questions. One that I'm really curious about recently with people is like, what has making art taught you about yourself?
Well, while making art, you're not just learning about yourself, but ultimately you're building yourself.
Yep.
Because your art is almost indistinct. It's not a completely distinct entity from you. It becomes part of your identity, and how you build it and how you make it and what kind of choices you make and what art from the past draws you, and all these things together. From all of them, you learn about who you are and your identity and where your roots are, and like how you react to to the resistance of the medium and the self-overcoming aspect of it.
Yeah.
And like the developmental aspect of it is all extremely illuminating.
Yeah. Very nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. I definitely agree with you there. I think just taking up any kind of craft or study or whatever it is, I think inevitably makes someone a more well-rounded person.
I mean, it's everyone should try to do some kind of art, even if they're not in any way professional, they don't think they're good or whatever. Just the psychological process itself of objectification of what is in your mind and putting it into a physical medium, right. And then looking at that. This in itself is a transformative experience psychologically, because you make something and then it becomes objectified, but then it's like part of you reflecting back at you.
Yeah.
It makes that process of de-objectification, and that gets into the feedback loop, and you learn about yourself that way. So it's meditative, it's transformative, it's psychological, it's revealing, it's initiation in a way.
Nice. And so finally, do you have any advice, or would you have any advice for young artists, or perhaps your younger self, if that's an easier way to think about it?
My advice would be to keep that open and free spirit of inquiry, and whether your views or tastes align with the current trends or not, make sure you're making your choices and what you're doing consciously, and not for the wrong reasons of following some trend or trying to mimic what's going on in some fleeting trend of the time, basically. Not try to be authentic with yourself and try to ask yourself why you're doing what you're doing. Like, and just being honest with yourself, basically. That's what my advice would be.
Yeah. Nice. Well, sweet.
And I've myself, I'm not trying to talk about it from some kind of high point. I myself struggled with it, and being influenced by something is fine as long as it resonates with you on some level, and you have to examine yourself all the time.
Right.
Like, why does it resonate with you? Why is this? Why is that? And if you're authentic to yourself, you have to constantly raise these questions.
Nice. Sweet. That's great advice. I need to write that one down. Well, sweet. Vladimir, thank you so much for coming on the show. And I'll remind people that on, what is it, July 17th? Is that the opening?
That's right. July 17th.
All right. July 17th at Ryan Joseph Gallery. Come check it out. I cannot wait to see these in person. I'll actually, for the opening, unfortunately, I'll be out of town, so I might try and come a little early, or if not, like a week or two after.
It's really, really unfortunate that I can't come as well.
Yeah.
For a variety of reasons that are kind of beyond my control right now. But I would really love to be there. Hopefully next time.
Yeah. And yeah, man, I can't wait, for real. And again, thank you so much for agreeing to be on here. And thank you
very much for having me.
Yeah. Sweet. Well, thanks for listening, everybody, and we'll see you next time. Thank you again for listening to another episode of Artsy AF podcast. If you are interested in supporting the Patreon, that address is patreon.com/artsyaf podcast. And I want to thank all my patrons. You guys keep this engine running, and I couldn't do it without you. Go over there and check out the tiers I have available. It includes video, guest suggestions, patron-only posts, and some merchandise. Thank you again for listening. Please rate, review, subscribe. Do all those little things that help get Artsy AF into the consciousness of more and more people. Yeah.